I hope it's paying attention. Minister, on the 24th of February, you told budget estimates the reason why coal-fired power is coming out in New South Wales is a number of reasons. One is, yes, a commitment to reducing emissions, but that's not the driver. The driver is that our coal-fired power stations, which were built in the 80s and the 90s, are very old. They're coming to an end. So, Minister, if the paramount reason now for the renewable rollout is because our coal-fired power stations are getting old, has the government considered alternatives to closure, and in particular the option chosen by most coal-fired power station owners across history and around the world, refurbishment?
The Honourable Penny Sharp.
I thank the Honourable John Ruddock for his questions. The short answer is no. There is a number of reasons why coal-fired power is coming out, and these things can exist at the same time. There doesn't need to be one or the other, and there's no trick here. Essentially, we have coal-fired power stations that are very old. We also have coal-fired power stations that are privatised. They're not actually, and I know that you're a big supporter of that, they're not actually in the purview and the total control and all responsibility of the New South Wales Government. However, we do work very closely with those that operate them. The point here is the thing that is driving particularly short-term spikes in our energy prices is when coal-fired power stations break down. And they break down more significantly. We've had data coming out of AEMO that shows that they are breaking down more frequently, and we've had more unplanned outages. That is the nature of the fact that they are old. So in terms of the way that we're dealing with that is we're doing the responsible thing, which is to replace our energy system, one, to tackle climate change. It's actually a thing. I know you disagree. But we're going to continue to do that, and we're very committed to doing that. The second part of it is, in the next 15 years, our 4 coal-fired power stations are going to come out of the system, and we need to replace that energy because that energy is the foundation and the basis of the prosperity of this state and the ability for businesses and households to operate and for our economy to operate. So that is the plan. If there are private companies that wish to refurbish that, they can consider that. There's no ban on them doing that, but they're not doing it because actually the market doesn't require it to do that, and there are better alternatives. The point that I would also make is this government's also taken a pragmatic approach, which is to work with companies like Origin in relation to Eraring as we manage coal-fired out and renewables in.
Thank you. The Honourable John Ruddock.
You know, Mr President, all around the world as we meet here today, coal-fired power stations are being refurbished. They typically have a lifespan of 40 years and they get maintained and they get upgraded because they're profitable. Now, it was 20 years ago, 2006, that Al Gore came out with his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and we were told we need to do the renewable rollout because of global warming and rising oceans, and it simply didn't happen. It was false science. Then we were told, oh, well, now we need to do it because it's going to deliver cheaper electricity. It's absurd. It's all gone up exponential. The more we go down the renewable road, the more exponential it gets. So now they ran out of all the other reasons for it. They're saying, oh, the coal-fired power stations are getting old. And the leader of the government just said, well, the private stations can refurb if they want it. No, you well know, Minister, that you have made it a commercial impossibility for them to refurbish. That is exactly that's why they're not refurbishing. They would love to refurbish. So, Mr President, I would just like to say to the kids in the gallery, don't let these people trick you over climate change. They are freaking you out.
The member's time has expired.
Thank you.
This is all very
leader
enjoyable.
of the government. 1,
climate change is real. 2, this government is determined to take action on it. 3, we're also determined to rebuild an energy system and we're doing that in the cheapest way possible, which is actually replacing with renewables over time. And the point that I would make is New South Wales has been a coal-exposed state for a very long time. Over 80% of our coal, until about the last 5 years, was 80% of our energy generation came from coal. That's now down in the last quarter, because of the renewables rollout, down to around 54%. The other good news is the wholesale price is also down by half price because we've got so many renewables actually in the system. This is the reality. And this is what we're dealing with, and this is the most responsible thing we can do, not only for our economy, not only for the planet, but actually for the future prosperity and the future opportunities for young people and future generations, particularly those people who, and I welcome all of the young people in the gallery when we talk about their future, which is actually about leaving a planet better off than how we found it.
Thank you.
Mr President, I rise to take note of what the Minister for Climate Change said today about why we have to close down our coal-fired power stations and replace them with the amazing renewables. Now, we were originally told we needed to do this because coal was making the world too hot, but they were like the witch doctors in prehistory. They were fake prophecies. It was around this time global warming was rebadged as climate change. Now, if it had truly been getting hotter, Mr President, they could have stuck with the original branding. Then we were told that we need to close coal-fired power because wind and solar will deliver cheaper energy, but everyone knows that electricity prices have only gone up exponentially with more to come. We fell for lines like, but the wind and the sun are for free. Yeah, but the turbines and the panels and the transmission lines and the batteries and all the real estate that needs to be bought, that ain't free. A lump of coal is millions of years of compressed sunlight. Now, the reason has switched again. Now we have to have renewables because of coal-fired power stations are ageing. Okay, all infrastructure ages and requires being serviced and maintained, and every few decades seriously refurbished. Coal-fired power stations are being refurbished all around the world, but they're not in New South Wales, and there's one reason for that, Mr President: this Parliament. This Parliament has introduced compliance costs via endless environmental standards, market-distorting incentives for renewables funded by the taxpayer, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Scheme, the Clean Air Act, the Electricity Infrastructure Investment Act, the Climate Change Net Zero Future Act. Plus, we have a political class that is openly hostile to coal and its rhetoric. And after all this, the government seems surprised and says, gee, why doesn't anybody want to invest in refurbishing their coal-fired power stations? It'd be like, Mr President, I see the Honourable Wes Fang tomorrow, 5 minutes before Parliament starts, I go up and punch him in the face. And he gets knocked down, and then he says, oh, I can't go to work. Why can't you come to work today, Mr Fang? Why can't you? I've done the damage, and now I'm saying, what's wrong with you? Why can't you come to work? That's the same rhetoric that we have here. But there is another insidious impact renewables are having on coal stations. The primary driver of wear and tear on coal stations is the operational stress imposed by intermittent renewables. Wind and solar do occasionally flood the grid with energy, which forces coal plants designed for a steady, reliable baseload power to rapidly slow down, run at inefficient minimal levels or even shut down. Then, when the renewable supply drops and demand rises, i.e. nighttime, those same plants must urgently ramp back up. This repeated cycle inflicts severe thermal fatigue, mechanical stress, corrosion, wear on boilers, turbines, tubes, welds and piping. The coal-fired power plants are breaking down not merely because they're old, but because current policy has turned them into unwilling shock absorbers for renewable energy. It's time the House faced this truth, Mr President.